Hi, I'm Vion. I used to think that keeping quiet meant keeping peace, but then my 6-year-old daughter whispered, "Mommy, it hurts to sit." And no one at that Thanksgiving table even flinched. They said she was dramatic. They said I was unstable. But what would you do if your child looked at you and begged? Not with words, but with eyes that had seen too much. Would you pretend not to hear her? Or would you do what I did and call 911 on your own family? Because what they covered up wasn't just abuse, it was a system built on silence. And I wonder, how long had they known? The front steps creaked beneath our feet, but it wasn't the sound that made me pause. It was the silence behind the door. That old, heavy kind of quiet, like the house was holding its breath. I looked down. Isla clutched her raccoon plush against her chest, eyes wide and hopeful. "It smells like pie," she whispered. I managed a smile. She didn't need to know how much I wanted to turn around. Inside, the wallpaper hadn't changed. That same butter yellow pattern curled at the corners, like it was too tired to hold on. The furniture was polished, the air thick with cinnamon and expectation. Mama, Vera, gave me the kind of hug that says you've overstayed before you've sat down. "You look worn out," she said, which was her way of telling me I looked like trouble. Leora floated in next, all pearls and performance, setting the table like we were hosting the mayor. She looked me over and said nothing. Ephraim was already planted in the recliner, drink in hand, like he lived there. He smiled, too wide, like he was trying to sell something no one should buy. We were barely 5 minutes in, and Isla already clung tighter to my hand. "You're okay?" I mouthed. She nodded, but her eyes never stopped scanning the room. Dinner moved forward like it always did. Too many dishes, too little sincerity. Blessings were spoken, gratitude was forced. Leora turned to Isla with a sweet voice she reserved for cameras and said, "Why don't you sit with your cousins, honey?" Her tone had that brittle edge. Isla froze. Her hand trembled slightly. I saw it. No one else did. I leaned in. "Go ahead, baby. I'll be right here." She didn't move. "Isla," I whispered, "what's wrong?" She looked at me, and it was like her whole face cracked. "Mommy," she whispered, "if I sit, my private part will hurt." Every sound in the room muffled. Forks paused. Glasses hovered midair. I could hear my own pulse. My response was instinct. I reached for her, steady. "Okay, sweetie, you don't have to sit. Just stay by me." I knelt beside her, brushing her hair behind her ear, like everything was normal. Leora laughed. She's always been dramatic, just like her aunt. Mama shot me a look sharp enough to slice pie. "Don't encourage it, Sylvia. She needs structure." Ephraim chuckled. "Back in our day, kids didn't get to negotiate dinner seats." I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. My silence made them squirm more than a speech ever could. But inside, I was burning. I studied Isla. Her back was straight, unnaturally so. Her feet curled in. She flinched when Leora's hand brushed her shoulder passing the gravy. That wasn't drama. That was fear. I didn't explode. I observed. I logged every micro-expression. Every time she didn't laugh when the others did. Every time she touched her raccoon like it was a life raft. After dessert, while the others debated politics like it wasn't just posturing, I pulled Isla aside into the hallway. Soft light flickered from the sconces. My voice matched it, low even. "Tell me exactly what hurts. Mommy's listening." She hesitated. Then, "It's not just the chair. He said not to tell." The house kept breathing, like nothing had changed. But in that moment, everything had. I didn't flinch when she said it. He said not to tell. But I felt my lungs tighten. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders and led her back into the guest room without another word. The hallway lights hummed above us as we passed the kitchen, where laughter had returned like nothing had ever been interrupted. Inside the guest room, the light was soft, a pinkish glow from the old ceramic lamp Vera never replaced. Isla climbed onto the bed, still in her sweater and tights, pulling her raccoon plush close. I knelt to help her remove her shoes, but she shook her head. Gently, firmly. I want them on, she murmured. My fingers hovered midair, then withdrew. All right, baby, I said, smoothing her blanket over her legs. You can sleep just how you like. I turned to fold her jacket, and that's when a small slip of paper tumbled from the inside pocket. At first, I thought it was just some scrap, maybe a receipt. But when I opened it, my chest clenched. In crude, shaky print, it read, "Don't tell, or I'll take the raccoon." I didn't gasp, didn't drop the note. I folded it right back, slid it into my phone case, and leaned over to kiss Isla's forehead. You're safe here, I whispered, even if someone told you otherwise. She didn't reply. Her eyes were already drifting, the way a child's does when the day has been too long and too heavy. I sat beside her, watching the way her hands clutched the raccoon, not as a toy, but as a shield. The walls of this house had seen a lot. I used to think they held family secrets, like quilted memories. Now I saw them for what they were, silent collaborators. I stepped into the hallway, phone in hand, and took a quiet photo of the note. Then one of Isla lying there, fully clothed, shoes on. Her raccoon held like a hostage. Back in the room, Isla stirred slightly. She sat up halfway and walked to the window. She placed both shoes carefully on the sill. Why there, baby? I asked gently. In case I have to run. Windows are faster than doors. I blinked hard. Not to keep tears in, but to keep rage out. You're very smart, I said, crouching beside her. She nodded like it was obvious, then crawled back under the covers, facing the wall. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long while. The house creaked in the usual places, but everything felt more hollow. I remembered something one of the shelter directors used to say. If a child prepares an escape route, you're already too late to doubt. I opened my email and sent myself the photos with the subject line, "Lockstep evidence," just in case anything went missing later. The next room over, Mama was still talking to Leora about casserole recipes like betrayal didn't hang in the air thick as molasses. I didn't confront anyone, not yet. That would come. But I wasn't sitting on my hands either. I set my alarm early. We'd need to leave before sunrise. Hours passed. The old house settled. I stayed in a chair near the foot of Isla's bed, not trusting myself to leave her alone. Not after what she'd said. Near midnight, Isla shifted in her sleep, her voice barely more than breath. I was a good girl today, she mumbled. He won't take the raccoon, right? I reached out and took her small hand in mine, gripping it gently but firm enough for her to know. No, baby. No one's taking anything from you ever again. The sun had just started to creep through the gauzy curtains when I opened my eyes. I was still in the chair at the foot of Isla's bed, my neck stiff, feet numb. She was curled into a comma, shoes still on, raccoon clutched tight, like her body didn't trust the idea of rest. I didn't move. I just watched her breathe. In the hallway, I could already hear movement. The clatter of coffee cups, silverware, chairs sliding across tile. Another day, same script. The house was stretching itself awake, pretending it hadn't slept through a silent scream. I slipped out quietly and headed toward the kitchen, but something made me pause in the living room. On the side table, half hidden beneath a throw pillow, sat Mama's photo album. It was open. I leaned down, ready to close it, and then I saw it. A page filled with family snapshots, birthdays, 4th of July barbecues, blurry cake-blowing moments. And there, in the center, a photo from last Christmas. Isla sat on Vera's lap, expression distant. Leora and Ephraim flanked them, smiling too wide. A small, glossy sticker had been placed deliberately over Ephraim's face. A raccoon. I stared. Not over Vera, not Leora, just Ephraim. My breath caught in my throat, not because I was surprised, but because I'd missed it. That sticker wasn't a child's game. It was a coded message, a refusal. She had rewritten the photo to tell the truth the adults kept denying. My hand shook as I reached for my phone and snapped a picture of the page. Evidence again. Evidence she shouldn't have had to give. I thought back. How she tensed when he entered a room, how she sat stiff, shoes always ready, her eyes scanning for exits. And now, this. A silent act of protest pasted in plain sight. I returned to the guest room. Isla was still asleep. I opened my journal app and began logging every piece I had. Stickers, flinches, the note, shoes on the sill. Not for drama, not for doubt, for court. When Isla finally stirred, it was almost 9. She yawned, looked at me like she needed to check if I was real, then slid off the bed and walked into the kitchen like she hadn't just slept through landmines. I followed, kept my eyes scanning. She plopped down at the table with a box of crayons and a grocery store coloring book someone had left behind. Vera and Leora were discussing church attendance, like politics didn't matter anymore. Ephraim wasn't in sight. I offered Isla a banana. She shook her head, grabbed a red crayon. "Drawing again?" Vera said without turning. "That girl's always got her head in the clouds." I smiled, tight-lipped. "It's how she processes." Leora raised an eyebrow. "Or avoids. Same difference." I didn't rise. I watched Isla press the crayon so hard the paper buckled. Her brows furrowed. The raccoon tail she was coloring looked less like fur and more like a rope being twisted. Later that morning, after breakfast plates were cleared and Vera shooed everyone out to prep for lunch, I stepped into the backyard to breathe. The air had cooled, a little breeze passing over the hedges. I needed 5 minutes without performance. I tossed some trash into the outdoor bin and turned to head back in when I heard a voice from the fence line. "You know," the neighbor's voice was quiet, hesitant. Mrs. Colton, gray bun, apron dusted with flour, the kind of woman who baked apologies into pies. "I've heard little cries from that window at night, more than once." I froze. My spine straightened. "But I figured, kids cry, right?" She added quickly. "Didn't want to stir anything up." "Did you ever mention it to anyone?" I asked, as gently as I could. She shook her head. "No, honey, I just figured it wasn't my business." I nodded. "Thanks," I said, though my insides screamed. She meant well, but meaning well had never saved a child. Inside, Isla had moved on to another page. The raccoon was now beside a figure that looked like a box with legs. Ephraim again? I didn't ask. I didn't need to. I sat across from her, watched as she braided the tail of the raccoon she'd drawn. Over and over, tighter each time. Like if she didn't keep tension, it might unravel everything. I glanced once more at the album in the living room, the raccoon sticker staring back like it had known before any of us had dared speak. "They knew," I whispered to myself. "They just didn't want to say it first." I waited until the dishes were cleared and the background noise of the television took over the house. Vera had settled into her usual spot by the window, coffee cup in hand, flipping through an old Southern Living magazine like nothing in her world could ever be out of place. I took a slow breath and walked into the living room. "Mama," I said, keeping my tone even, "can we talk for a moment?" She looked up, polite and guarded. "Isla asleep?" I nodded. "She is. That's part of what I wanted to talk to you about." I sat down across from her and pulled the folded note from my sweater pocket, the one I'd found in Isla's coat. "She's been saying things that worry me. And I found this in her jacket last night." She took the paper without much interest. Her eyes skimmed the words, crude handwriting, barely legible, then back to me. "Don't tell, or I'll take the raccoon," I repeated aloud. "Mama, that's not nothing." Vera set the note aside like it was a grocery list. "She's a child, Sylvia. They make up stories. That girl's always been a little theatrical." "She's not making this up. She's terrified. She sleeps with her shoes on. She's putting stickers over Ephraim's face in photos. You really don't see the pattern here?" Vera leaned back, folded her napkin carefully in her lap, and offered a tight, icy smile. "You always do this. You find something to blow up, to stir, to ruin every holiday with some cause. Don't make a scene in front of your sister. The dismissal hit harder than I expected. She needs help, I said, voice barely above a whisper. She needs discipline, and you need to stop projecting. This isn't your shelter work, this is family. I didn't argue, not because she was right, but because I could see she'd made up her mind before I walked into the room. This wasn't about Isla. It was about control. It always had been. By midday, I'd made an appointment with Isla's pediatrician. It took 3 calls and a favor from a friend, but they fit us in late afternoon. I told Vera we were going to run an errand. She didn't ask what kind. The drive to the clinic was silent. Isla stared out the window, legs swinging, raccoon still in hand. Inside the exam room, she sat on the paper-covered table, quiet and obedient. The doctor, a man in his 40s, with kind eyes but a rushed manner, examined her gently. He glanced up at me as he rolled his stool back. "There's some redness," he said, choosing his words with caution, "but no signs of acute trauma." I nodded. "And her behavior? The note? Her reactions?" He offered a light chuckle, the kind that men use when they're uncomfortable. "Kids can be sensitive. Sometimes they don't like a family member, and it becomes exaggerated." My stomach turned. "We'll monitor, keep an eye on her. If anything changes physically, bring her back." I folded my arms. "Would you say that if she were your daughter?" The room fell quiet. We left without another word. Isla reached for my hand in the parking lot, and I squeezed it back. Driving home, my thoughts spiraled. I'd done the right thing, followed every rational step, told the adult in the room, sought medical confirmation, and still, no one wanted to name the thing that was sitting right in front of them. I watched Isla from the corner of my eye. She sat small in her booster seat, staring ahead. "I'm done asking," I said aloud, though I wasn't sure if I meant it for myself or the wind outside the window. Now I start proving. We pulled into the driveway just as the porch light clicked on. I shut off the engine and sat still. From the back seat came a voice, quiet, cracking. "Did I do something wrong?" I turned slowly, heart splintering. "No," I said. "You did everything exactly right." I didn't answer her right away. I just sat there, still behind the wheel, letting her questions settle into the dark space between us. Did I do something wrong? There's no way to soften the truth for a child, not without insulting their intelligence. Isla deserved better than comfort laced with lies. "No, baby," I said. "They did." The next morning, I dressed Isla in layers, sweater, leggings, her favorite sneakers with the sparkly laces. I told Vera we were headed to the park, didn't offer more. She didn't ask. Maybe she thought I needed the air, or maybe she was too used to avoiding anything that didn't start with hymns and end in casserole. I drove straight to Isla's school. The plan was simple. Request a meeting with her counselor, gather copies of any drawings or behavioral notes, and verify that her teachers had seen the same things I had. But the moment we stepped through the front office doors, I sensed something was off. Mrs. Dugan at the desk stiffened as soon as she saw me. She didn't smile, didn't say good morning. "Isla's already been checked out today," she said flatly. My blood ran cold. "By who?" She tapped a few keys, looked again. "Leora Duncan, her mother." I blinked. "That's not possible. She's not listed on the emergency contact anymore. I updated that form myself." Mrs. Dugan didn't budge. "I'm just telling you what the system says. We had paperwork filed this morning. Temporary reinstatement of maternal custody." I felt Isla's hand tighten in mine. "Where is she now?" "She left 10 minutes ago," the receptionist said, almost apologetically. "I'm sorry." Outside in the parking lot, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my messages. Nothing from Leora. No missed calls. No warnings. But then, as if the devil heard me think, my screen lit up with a new text. "Stop digging. You're not her mother. One more step and we'll bury you in court." It was followed by a photo. Isla. on the school's front lawn, taken from across the street, zoomed in enough that I could see the exact angle of her backpack strap slipping from her shoulder. A threat wrapped in surveillance. I turned back toward the building, already redialing the legal office I'd been referred to by an old colleague. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to organize. Compile. Strike when it counted. That afternoon, I met with Anael in her modest office off Main Street. She was the kind of woman who wore calm like armor, soft-spoken but steel underneath. "She filed a claim this morning?" she asked, flipping through the scanned paperwork I'd emailed an hour earlier. "Claimed emotional manipulation," I said. "Said I was alienating Isla." Anael's pen didn't pause. "They're building a custody case." I didn't blink. "Then I'll build something stronger." She looked up. "You ready for this?" "They started it," I said. "I'm just drawing the line." We spent the next 2 hours gathering every text, voice memo, photo. I uploaded screenshots of the note, Isla's drawings, a clip of her saying she didn't want to go to her mother's house. I'd never asked her to say that. It just spilled out one evening while she colored. By sunset, Anael had drafted a motion to challenge the emergency custody reinstatement. It would take a judge's review. But in the meantime, Isla was with Leora. And there was nothing I could do but wait. Back in the car, I parked outside Leora's apartment complex. I wasn't planning to go in. I just wanted to see if Isla was okay. But I didn't have to get out. She was standing in the second-floor window, behind the blinds, watching. She didn't wave. I didn't leave. "You want a war?" I whispered, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "Fine. I build case files better than you build narratives." The next morning, I didn't go back to Leora's. I drove straight to Anael's office, gripping my coffee like it might keep my hands from trembling. The building was still half asleep when I arrived. Dark hallway, security lights buzzing overhead. But Anael was already at her desk, sleeves rolled up, files stacked like fortresses around her laptop. She slid a folder toward me as I sat down. "They're prepping for war. You?" I nodded. "They want escalation? I'll give them escalation." She clicked through the folder. "We need something actionable. Emotional manipulation is muddy. If we're going to court, you'll need physical indicators, patterns, third-party statements, anything they can't spin into concerned aunt gone rogue." I pulled out the photo of Isla's drawing from last week, the one with the sticker over Ephraim's face. Then another, taken the night before. A chair drawn in thick, jagged lines, red spikes poking from the seat, a stick figure crying above it. At the bottom, in uneven print, Grandma's chair. "It hurts to sit long." Anael squinted. "That's symbolic, sure. But what's the context?" She drew it after dinner. Same chair she flinched from when they made her sit at the kids' table. Anael didn't blink. "That'll do?" By dusk, I was back at Vera's, the sun sinking behind the sycamores lining her driveway. The house looked unchanged, but I wasn't. Not anymore. Isla was in the kitchen when I walked in, hunched over a coloring book. She looked up, smiled softly, then handed me the drawing. I didn't say anything. I just took a photo, folded it once, and tucked it into my coat pocket. I turned to Vera, who stood at the stove. "We need to talk, now." She raised an eyebrow. "Can it wait? Dinner's almost ready." "No," I said. "It can't." She followed me onto the porch, arms crossed before I even spoke. "There's evidence now," I told her. "Drawings, notes, statements." "I don't want to hear this again," she cut in, voice sharp. "You're creating problems where none exist." "I'm documenting problems you keep ignoring," she scoffed. "You really want to ruin this family in front of everyone?" I didn't answer her directly. Instead, I pulled out my phone, tapped in 3 digits, and hit call. 911. "What's your emergency?" My niece disclosed sexual abuse and produced supporting evidence in multiple forms. I said clearly. "I'm requesting an immediate welfare check and pediatric evaluation." There was a pause, then the dispatcher confirmed an officer, and EMT would be dispatched. Vera paled. You're doing this? In front of your mother? In front of your family? I'm doing this for Isla. And if that means embarrassing the rest of you, so be it. 20 minutes later, red and blue lights splashed across the front windows. Isla clung to her raccoon as EMTs knelt beside her on the rug. Vera stood frozen in the entryway, lips pressed so tight they'd turned white. Ephraim emerged from the hallway, eyes wide, voice booming. "This is what unstable women do," he barked. "Make noise when they've got no real proof." I turned to him slowly, deliberately. "You should sit down, Ephraim. You're about to be very busy answering questions." The EMTs examined Isla in the back room, while 2 officers asked preliminary questions. I answered each one. Calm, direct, controlled. I gave them names, timelines, copies of drawings, and the note. When they walked Isla to the ambulance, she didn't cry. She didn't ask questions. She just looked at me, then at Vera, then climbed inside. As I followed her out, Vera hissed behind me. "I'll never forgive you for this." I paused at the threshold, turned back just enough to meet her eyes. "Then you were never the one I needed forgiveness from." By the time I got home from the hospital, the sky had already darkened. The porch light flickered overhead, like it couldn't decide whether to keep going or just quit altogether. I stepped into the duplex, kicked off my shoes, and dropped my keys into the bowl by the door. Everything looked the same, but it felt different, like the air knew something had shifted. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check the fridge. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch and pulled out my laptop. The soft click of the keys became my only soundtrack. I uploaded everything: photos, scanned drawings, copies of the note, the incident report. I labeled each file with timestamps. Every detail backed up 3 ways: cloud, flash drive, email. This was my fortress now. The phone buzzed next to me. No caller ID. I stared at it, let it ring once, twice. Then it went quiet. A minute later, a message popped up. "You're making it worse. Step back now, or lose her forever." Attached was a photo. Isla, outside the school from last week, taken from across the street, just far enough to make it clear someone had been watching. The angle, the framing, this wasn't random. I saved the message, took screenshots, and sent everything to Aniel with a single subject line: "New threat." 10 minutes later, Aniel replied, "Print it all, save it offline. We'll talk tomorrow." The next morning, I walked into her office before she'd even finished her coffee. She handed me a manila envelope without a word. I opened it slowly. Inside was a copy of the petition Leora's lawyers had filed, a psychologist's report, formal letterhead, signature scribbled at the bottom: Dr. Thorne Randall. "He's not licensed here," Aniel said, already anticipating my next question. "He's based out of Nevada, had disciplinary action 2 years ago for misdiagnosis in a custody case." "Yet here he is," I muttered. "Claiming you've projected trauma from your time at the shelter onto Isla," she added, "calling you unstable, overattached, emotionally invasive." My hands clenched in my lap. "They're trying to erase me." Aniel's eyes didn't waver. "And discredit everything you've built." I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I went home, pulled every old notebook from my closet, scanned pages from sessions I'd taken notes on. None of it mentioned names, but it showed patterns. How often children hide trauma in symbols. How they use art when they don't have words. That afternoon, I walked through my neighborhood for air, hoping movement would help. But the looks followed me. Subtle, but there. Mr. Klein didn't wave like he usually did. The woman 3 doors down clutched her son's backpack a little tighter when I passed. By dinner, I'd seen the thread on the local parenting forum. Family destroyer or protector? It wasn't long, just enough to stir the pot. A few vague posts, links to public filings, a photo of me standing outside the courthouse. I logged off, powered down the laptop, and stood in the hallway of my own home, staring at the photo of Isla taped to the fridge. Her birthday last year, frosting on her cheek. The raccoon beside her on the table like a silent chaperone. They can burn my name, I said to no one, but they won't take my truth. As I folded the last affidavit into its envelope, my phone rang again. Annelle. I answered. They're pushing hard, she said. Filed to make Dr. Randall's statement admissible retroactively. Of course they did. But we're ready. I've got the motion to strike, records of his suspension, and the ruling from his last case. There was a pause. They're not just trying to discredit you, Annelle said. They're trying to erase you. I stared at the envelope in my hand. Then I'll leave behind something they can't edit. Evidence. The morning after the motion was filed, I was mid-coffee when the call came through. Isla's school counselor, Mrs. Vera. Not my mother, but a woman with more backbone than the entire family I was born into, sounded breathless. We were charging Isla's school tablet yesterday, just routine, she began. There's a voice recording saved. I think you need to hear it. My stomach sank. Play it. I heard shuffling, the clink of something being set down, then her voice returned, quiet but resolute. She hit play. The audio clicked on, muffled at first, then startlingly clear. Don't let her talk too much, Leora's voice snapped, tight with stress. A beat. Vera's voice, colder than I remembered, even when she scolded me as a teenager. If she keeps flapping her mouth, he'll end up in jail and we all lose. Then a pause. A sharp smack. And then Isla. Fragile, pleading. Mommy, please don't let him. Mrs. Vera didn't speak after the clip ended. I couldn't either, not for a solid 5 seconds. I'm sending it over now, she finally said, and I'll file the mandatory report, immediately. By noon, Annelle had the file downloaded, encrypted, and added to the case. She called mid-afternoon, her tone sharper than usual. We're not dealing with silence anymore, she said. This is collusion, obstruction, intentional suppression. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. They weren't just quiet. They were guards at the gate. We'll use that, she said. Courts don't like conspiracies. That night, Isla sat across from me at the kitchen table, her dinner untouched. Instead, she scribbled in colored pencil, focused, eyes flicking from memory to page and back again. Can I show you something? She asked without looking up. Always, I said. She held up a sheet. Another stick figure, alone, small. A couch loomed behind it, and in a gray-shaded box sat another man. This one labeled in shaky letters, Uncle Kaysen. The figure wasn't Ephraim. The face was wrong, the hair different. My throat closed. He came in when Grandma went to bed, she whispered. I didn't want to play his quiet game. I leaned in, taking the paper gently from her hand. What did he tell you, Isla? She traced a crayon over the box again, back and forth, back and forth. He said winners don't fidget. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I cataloged. The coloring, the words, the name. Annelle called that evening. We might have more than one defendant, I told her. It's systemic. They let it happen, maybe encouraged it. Her voice was low. Then we take it all down, one affidavit at a time. The next day, I walked into the family court building, a folder full of fire in my hand. I passed the front desk, gave my name, signed the visitor sheet. Mrs. Lanning from the DA's office met me in a side room. She reviewed the evidence, audio, drawings, therapist's summary, and her face hardened with every page. You have enough for an emergency hearing, she said, but this isn't just custody anymore. This might be criminal neglect, coordinated cover-up. I nodded. Then we're not backing down. Be ready, she warned. This'll burn a lot of bridges. Good, I said, sliding the drawing of Uncle Kaysen into the stack, because she's not the only one he touched. The courthouse was cold that morning, not the kind of cold you feel in your bones, but the kind that settles in your gut, slow and heavy. I'd barely touched my coffee. Isla sat beside me at the kitchen table, legs swinging, her fork poking at the scrambled eggs she'd asked for but hadn't eaten. The folder on the counter was packed, photocopies of every drawing, voice memos saved onto flash drives, affidavits, and therapist reports. My armor. Isla's voice broke the silence, barely above a whisper. If I tell the truth, will they hate you? I turned. Her eyes weren't asking about them. She was asking about me. I knelt down so we were eye to eye. They might, I said, honest and soft, but being hated by the wrong people means you did something right. She looked away for a second. Mommy says you're just jealous. I placed my hand gently over hers. Truth isn't supposed to make everyone comfortable, baby. It's meant to make things right. She didn't cry. She nodded, and that told me everything I needed to know. Aniel met us at the courthouse steps. Her suit was dark gray, like a storm waiting to roll in. The judge agreed to an evidentiary hearing. It won't be open court, but it's progress. Isla will be in a separate room. Only the advocates. No cross-exam. I exhaled. That's all she needs. Inside, we were escorted to a waiting area just outside Judge Halden's chambers. The air buzzed with tension, the kind that made every breath feel earned. When Isla's name was called, I squeezed her hand, then let it go. A counselor walked her down the hallway, slow and steady. I watched her until the door closed behind them. In the main courtroom, Anael laid out the sequence. Audio first, drawings next. Then came the therapist's latest submission, a fresh piece Isla had drawn during their session 2 days ago. It was simple. A long table, like the one at Thanksgiving. Isla, small, seated at the far end. Around her, stick figures representing family, backs turned. The caption read, in shaky crayon lines, I was there, but they didn't look. You could have heard a breath drop. The room didn't gasp, it sank. Even Judge Halden paused. He adjusted his glasses, stared at the image longer than anything else. His face didn't change, but the energy did. He asked no follow-up questions, just thanked Anael, nodded toward the clerk, and turned to review the next exhibit. I sat there, back straight, arms folded. Not defensive. Anchored. Afterward, Isla returned to the room, holding the counselor's hand. She walked over to me and leaned in. They didn't see me before, she whispered. But they do now, don't they? I looked her in the eye, brushing a loose curl behind her ear. And you'll never be invisible again. By the time we got back from court, Isla was already half asleep in the car seat, her head leaning against the window, clutching her raccoon like it was still the only thing in the world that understood her. I carried her inside, tucked her into the bed in the guest room, and sat on the edge for a moment longer than I needed. Her breath was slow, even. It was the first night she'd fallen asleep without asking me to hold her hand. In the living room, Aniel had her laptop open on the coffee table, files spread across the couch. I sat down beside her, kicked off my heels, and just let my head fall back against the cushion. The judge is reviewing everything this weekend, she said quietly. Ruling might come Monday morning. I nodded, not even bothering to hide how spent I felt. For a minute, we didn't say anything, just sat in that fragile quiet that comes after the bomb's gone off, but the dust hasn't settled. I'll make tea, I finally muttered, standing. When I returned with the mugs, Aniel had closed the laptop. A single sheet of paper lay in the center of the coffee table. Isla's latest drawing. It was different from the others. A tall stick figure woman, hair in long brown loops. A massive shield in front of her. On the shield, written in bold, uneven letters, Aunt Vion. She didn't let them touch me. I couldn't speak. I didn't have to. I reached for the drawing, folded it once, placed it gently into the court evidence folder beside me. No signature needed. The next day, the ripple started. A text from my cousin Lisa. Hey, just so you know, we're staying out of this. You've made things complicated. Followed by a block of silence where her profile picture used to be. An email bounced back from an aunt who had once sworn she'd be at my wedding no matter what. Mailbox full. Sure. No calls from Vera, no texts. Leora posted a carousel of Isla's baby photos with the caption, My daughter is my world. Praying for clarity during this confusing time. The comments were full of Bible quotes and women saying things like, sending strength, mama, and children are resilient. No one mentioned Isla's name, not one word about the truth. I didn't comment. I didn't repost. I uploaded a single image to my private profile, Isla's drawing, the one with the shield. The caption, protection isn't always pretty, but it's always right. I disabled comments. I didn't check who liked it. That evening, I found myself back at the dining table, organizing paperwork again. Isla wandered in quietly, holding her raccoon like she used to when she was nervous, but there was something steadier about her now. Like the raccoon was a companion, not a lifeline. She climbed onto the chair across from me, reached into her pocket, and placed a folded piece of paper on the table. Another drawing. This time, it was just a house. 2 stick figures. A shield. The sun. No caption. Just the image. I smiled. Looks safe, I said. She grinned. It is. Just as I was sliding the paper into the folder, Annelle stepped in from the hallway, holding her phone. They want mediation, she said. Leora's team is afraid of trial. I looked up. Good, I said, voice calm but unmistakable. Let's give them something to really fear. The silence of Saturday crept in like fog, quiet, unassuming, but heavy enough to fill the corners of every room. Isla slept in. The kind of sleep that comes after truth has finally been spoken and heard. No nightmares, no pacing, just breath and blankets and peace. I found myself cleaning, not aggressively, just methodically, folding towels, organizing mail, making a dent in the closet where old boxes gathered dust. I was looking for Isla's birth certificate just to have on hand, but what I found instead stopped me cold. Tucked inside an envelope marked Dad's stuff was a letter. Yellowed, edges soft. My name written in his blocky, unmistakable print. I sat down on the hardwood floor and opened it slowly, as if the paper might shatter. Fionn, it began. If you ever feel like the black sheep, remember? Shepherds don't follow the herd. I laughed, sharp and sudden, almost choking. God, that sounded like him. If something ever happens, and a child is in pain, protect her, even if it means losing the ones you came from. Your compass was always north, even when others spun. Trust it. I read the letter 3 times, then folded it neatly and slid it into my planner. Not for court. For me. By mid-afternoon, Annelle texted. The mediation meeting was confirmed for Monday. Leora's attorneys wanted a conversation, not a courtroom. I didn't answer right away. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stared out the window. When I finally replied, all I wrote was, tell them I'll be there, but not to compromise, to testify. Later that evening, my inbox pinged. A message from Vira. Short. Terse. I can't support what you're doing. I hope you find peace. No love, Mom. No. We'll talk soon. Just that. I stared at the screen, then clicked the email shut. I didn't reply, but in my head, I whispered back. I already did. You just weren't there to see it. Isla and I ate dinner quietly. Grilled cheese and soup. She told me about the raccoon's new adventures in the backyard. I nodded, smiled, asked just enough to let her talk without leading. After she brushed her teeth, she came back into the kitchen, tugging at the hem of her pajama shirt. Do I have to go to court again? She asked. Not this time, I said. She hesitated. But if I wanted to, could I? I set my tea down. You get to choose. That's what this was always about. Her face relaxed. Not like a kid dodging a chore, but like someone finally offered a seat at her own table. That night, after she fell asleep, I laid out my outfit for Monday. Simple, clean. No ruffles, no armor. Just me. I stood in the doorway of the guest room a moment longer, watching Isla breathe. Then I turned out the light. Monday arrived with the sky a dull, washed-out gray. No sun, no rain, just that quiet in-between that always feels like something's waiting. We didn't speak much on the drive. Isla held her raccoon in one hand, my other hand in her lap. Her seatbelt was snug across her chest, and every now and then, she traced her finger along the stitching like it was a path she already knew by heart. Anael met us outside the courthouse. Her usual calm wasn't just present, it radiated. She nodded to Isla, who nodded back. They didn't need words anymore. Inside, the courtroom felt smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the absence of noise from people who used to dominate every room. Leora was there, lips pressed so tightly they looked like they might disappear altogether. Vera sat beside her, stiff as ever, hands folded like prayer might undo proof. Their lawyers whispered to each other, but no one looked at us. Kaysen and Ephraim weren't present. Their cases had already been referred to criminal court, and the walls that once sheltered them had become their cages. We took our seats. Isla wasn't physically in the room. She was in the adjacent office, sitting with a court-appointed counselor and 2 child advocates. She'd chosen to speak on camera, her choice. Aniel set the file on the table. The judge signaled to begin. A tech assistant hit play. Isla's face filled the screen. No fear, just steadiness. "My name is Isla," she said. "I'm 6. I want to tell the truth." The room was silent. She spoke softly but clearly, about the games she didn't like, the people who told her not to talk, the raccoon who helped her feel brave. Then came her last words. "Don't let them talk louder than me." I was there too. The screen went black. Nobody moved. Even the stenographer stopped typing for a moment. The judge leaned forward, looked down at the stack of evidence Anil had submitted. Drawings, medical records, recordings, sworn statements. He didn't say much, but when he spoke, it was final. Full temporary guardianship granted to me, effective immediately. Restraining orders issued against Leora and Vera, and a formal recommendation for investigation into neglect and failure to protect. Reporters waited outside, but I didn't stop. I didn't need cameras or quotes or headlines. Isla slipped her hand into mine as we stepped into the sunlight. She didn't smile big, but she smiled like someone who'd finally found quiet. "Do we go home now?" she asked. "We do." The rest of the day passed softly. No announcements, no drama. Back at the house, Isla opened the fridge, reached for the tape, and stuck a new drawing onto the door. It was simple. A house with open doors. 2 stick figures, a raccoon, the sun in the corner. At the bottom, written in crayon, "We don't run anymore." I stood back and finally let the breath go that I'd been holding for months. That night, as I tucked her in, she leaned close and whispered, "You didn't let them talk louder than me." I smiled. "And now," I said, smoothing her blanket, "you never have to whisper again."